you're just now joining us, a 2-year-old has died from a shooting tonight. Police believe that child was shot just once. We do not have a gender or a name on that child at this time. Again, no arrests have been made.
Biden's vice presidential running mate, Kamala Harris. Make no mistake, Kamala Harris is not a moderate. As a United States Senator, Kamala Harris blocked the Senate twice from voting to protect babies born alive after botched abortions. Over 500 babies have been born alive after botched abortions across the country in the past decades, yet Kamala Harris refuses to give them medical care. She would rather doctors leave those living human babies to die. Over 80% of Americans, Democrat and Republican, pro-choice and pro-life, want abortion banned in the third trimester. But Kamala Harris supports abortion up until the moment of birth, and even refusing babies medical treatment after they're born alive.
So let's play a game, Kamala. Let's play fakesies. Let's pretend your cause isn't real anarchy. Let's pretend that your perspective and mode of governance is supposedly for a free people. A people who was enslaved beneath the subjugation of a tyrannical government. One of your policies, being pro-killing babies, is a solution. And I, a defier of such heinous crimes, am labeled an anti-whatever list. And your only solution is my silencing. Well, if I stand alone, which I don't, and never will, then so be it. Come and treat me the way you do them kids. I will not stop working against you or people like you. Whether you think you have power, or whether you don't. But you know what? I don't care how powerful you think you are. I don't give a damn. We've just seen some footage of events that have happened in the past, a couple of months ago, and things that happened last night. So there's a problem, and here's a solution. The solution is changing your thought, changing your mind. Being better than you were yesterday, right? How do we do that? Well, we get out of what we think is owed to us. Nothing is owed to us. We have to earn, build, and grow for each other. We're not caring about each other, and that's the problem. How do you care for your neighbor? You gotta have an originalist perspective. I'm gonna read a book, but I want you to look at your own individual life and examine yourself while I'm reading this. I hope it don't bore you, but if it bores you, well then, damn it, pretend that we won't be coming for you. But look at this. This is a book. It's called The Heritage Guide to the Constitution, and this is a foreword or perspective written by David F. Forte, or Fort. So here we go. Originalism, in its various and sometimes conflicting versions, is today the dominant theory of constitutional interpretation. On the one hand, as complex as an originalist jurisprudence may be, the attempt to build a coherent, non-originalist justification of Supreme Court decisions, accepted desideratum, which means, I looked this up, something that is needed or wanted. Desideratum. A following state decisis, even if the legal principle has been wrongly begun, seems to have failed. At the same time, those espousing originalism have profited from the criticism of non-originalists, and the originalists' enterprise have become more nuanced and self-critical as research into the founding period continues to flourish. Indeed, it is fair to say that this generation of scholars knows more about what went into the Constitution than any other since the time of its founding. To paraphrase Thomas Jefferson, in a significant sense, we are all originalists now. This is true of both liberal and conservative judges. For example, in United States Term Limit Incorporated versus Thornton, 1995, Justice John Paul Stevens and Clarence Thomas engaged in a debate over whether the framers intended the Qualifications Clause, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 2, and Article 1, Section 3, Clause 3, to be the upper limit of what could be required of a person running for Congress. In Wallace versus Jaffrey in 1985, excuse me, Justice William H. Rehnquist expounded on the original understanding of the Establishment Clause Amendment 1, which Justice David Souter sought to rebut in Lee versus Wiseman in 1992. Even among avowed originalists, fruitful debate takes place. In McIntyre versus Ohio Elections Commission in 1995, Justice Thomas and Antonin Scalia disputed whether, and those guys are two originalists, disputed whether the anonymous pamphleteering of the founding generation was evidence that the free speech guarantee of the First Amendment was meant to protect such a practice. Originalism is championed by a number of fundamental reasons. First, it comports with the nature of a constitution which binds and limits any one generation from ruling according to the passions of the times. That's what's happening now. These guys have got into place. They're distorting the interpretation, they're distorting the translations of what they want it to mean for themselves so they can be ruled by the passions of the times. I'm going to post a link of a 11-minute video clip about the difference between a republic and a democracy. It's very important because it goes into understanding where anarchy comes in, oligarchy and monarchy and all that stuff. So somebody who gets it, like me, needs a refreshing, just go back, get an understanding of it, and then I read this thing and it's like, and now I know why I stand on it. Framers of the Constitution of 1787 knew what they were about, forming a frame of government for ourselves and our posterity, not for the government or not for the king or not for anybody else, but for the people. They did not understand we the people to be merely an assemblage of individuals as one point in time, but a people as an association. Indeed, a number of overlapping associations over the course of many generations, including our own. In the end, the Constitution of 1787 is as much a constitution for us as it was for the founding generation. Second, originalism supports legitimate popular government that is accountable. The framers believed that a form of government accountable to the people, supposedly accountable. See, that's where the problem is right here. Now that's what's needed to be fixed, because those people aren't held accountable to their crimes and their sins against us and humanity. The framers believed that a form of government accountable to the people, leaving them fundamentally in charge of their own destinies, best protected human liberty. If liberty is a fundamental aspect of human nature, then the Constitution of 1787 should be defended as a successful champion of human freedom. Originalism sits in frank gratitude for the political, economic, and spiritual prosperity midwifed by the Constitution and the trust the Constitution places in the people to correct their own errors. That's another thing that is wrong with us. People are looking for everybody else to blame instead of looking at our own individual filth. Best way I could say it without cussing, man. I'm trying to hold it back. Third, originalism accords with the constitutional purpose of limiting government. It understands the several parts of the federal government to be creatures of the Constitution and to have no legitimate existence outside of the Constitution. The authority of these various entities extend no further than what was developed upon them by the Constitution. In all free states where the Constitution is fixed, Samuel Adams wrote, and as the supreme legitimate derives its power and authority from the Constitution, it cannot overleap the bounds of it without destroying its own foundation. Fourth, it follows that originalism limits its judiciary. It prevents the Supreme Court from asserting its will over a careful mix of instrumental arguments that are charged with making policy, each accountable in various ways to the people. Chief Justice John Marshall overly deferring to the intention of the framers, insisting that that the framers of the Constitution contemplated that instrument as a rule of government of the courts as well as of the legislature. In words that judges and academics might well contemplate today, Marshall said, "Why otherwise does it direct the judges to take an oath to support it? This oath certainly applies in a special manner to their conduct and their official character. How immoral to impose it on them if they were to be used as an instrument and then knowing these instruments for violating what they swore to support." Marbury versus Madison. So why do you need to put your hand on the Bible and say the oath, swear your way, whatever they call it? Marbury versus Madison. So why otherwise does it direct the judges to take an oath to support it? So help me God, because if I don't, I'm going to strike you dead, Jack. Gonna get you some learned good. Fifth, supported by recent research, originalism comports with the understanding of what our Constitution was to be by the people who framed and ratified that document. It affirms that the Constitution is a coherent and interrelated document with subtle balances incorporated throughout, reflecting the founders' understanding of the self-motivated impulses of the human nature. The Constitution erected devices that work to frustrate those impulses while leaving open channels for effective and mutually supporting collaboration. It is, in short, a remarkable historical achievement. An unbalancing part of it could dismantle the sophisticated device it erected to protect the people's liberty. So, when one person is in power, that's called totalitarianism, when they instigate and authorize their own disposition onto everybody else without any hindrance, right? Self-motivated impulses are the result of that of Mao Zedong, Che Guevara, Hugo Chavez, the other Cuban kid, and the list goes on. So sixth, originalism, properly pursued, is not result-oriented, whereas much the non-originalist writing is patently so. If evidence demonstrates that the framers understood the commerce power, for example, to be broader than what we might wish, then the originalist ethically must accept the conclusion. If evidence shows that the commerce power was to be more limited than it is permitted to be today, then the originalist can legitimately criticize governmental institutions for neglecting their constitutional duty. In either case, the originalist is called to be humble in the face of the facts. The concept of the Constitution of 1787 as a good first draft is in need of instant revision and updating, encapsulating a vague phrase such as the living Constitution, which merely turns the Constitution into an unwritten charter to be developed by the contemporary values of sitting judges. Discerning the founders' original understanding is not a simple task. There are the problems of the availability of evidence, the reliability of the data, the relative weight of authority to be given to different events, personalities, and organizations of the era, the relevance of subsequent history, and the conceptual apparatus needed to interpret the data. So originalists differ among themselves on all these points and sometimes come to widely divergent conclusions. Nevertheless, the values underlying originalism do mean that the quest, as best as we can accomplish it, is a moral imperative. So how does one go about ascertaining the original meaning of a constitution? All originalists begin the text of the Constitution, the words of a particular clause. In search for the meaning of the text and its legal effects, originalists, researchers, variously look for the following. 1. The evident meaning of the word. 2. The meaning according to the lexicon of the times. 3. The meaning in context with other sections of the Constitution. The meaning according to the words by the framers suggesting the language. That's where we go with that. 4. The elucidation of the meaning by debate within the Constitutional Convention. The historical provenance of the words, particularly their legal history. the word in the context of the contemporaneous social, economic, and political events, the words in the context of the revolutionary struggle, the words in the context of the political philosophy shared by the founding generation or by the particular interlocutors of the convention. The hell is that? Interlocutors of the convention. So interlocutor is just somebody who's having a conversation, person taking part in the conversation or dialogue. So interlocutor. All right, didn't know that word. Historical, religious, or philosophical authority put forth by the framers, which is another important piece of information because that's where they say we're not a Judeo-Christian country. On the contrary, it shows here that it is relevant to ascertain an originalist perspective by doing some research upon the historical, religious, or philosophical authority put forth by the framers. The commentary by contemporaneous interpreters such as Publius and the Federalists, the subsequent historical practice of the founding generation to exemplify the understood meaning, for example, the actions of President Washington, the First Congress, the Chief Justice Marshall, early judicial interpretations, evidence of long-standing traditions, and demonstrate the people's understanding of the word. So as passed down by William Blackstone. That's an awesome name. William Blackstone. And later summarized by Joseph Story. Similar interpretive principles guided the framers' generation itself. It is the legal effect of the words in the text that matters, and it is meaning to be determined by well-known and redefined rules of interpretation, supplemented, where hopeful, by the understanding of those who drafted the text and the legal culture within which they operated, as Chief Justice Marshall put it. To say that the intention of the instrument must prevail, that this intention must be collected from its words, that its words are to be understood in the sense in which that they are generally used by those from whom an instrument was intended, that its provisions and they are neither to be restricted into insignificance nor extended to objects not comprehended in them nor contemplated by its framers, is to repeat what has been already said more at large, and it is all that can be necessary. Ogden versus Saunders. Marshall, Chief Justice, dissenting, 1827. Marshall's dialectical manner of parsing a text, seeking its place in the coherent context of the document, buttressed by the understanding of those who drafted and the generally applicable legal principles of the time are exemplified by his classic opinions in Marbury versus Madison. I don't know why that was hard to read. Both Marshalls, Marston 1803, McCullough versus Maryland 1819, Gibden versus Ogden 1824, and Barron versus Baltimore 1833. Both Marshall's ideological allies and enemies such as Alexander Hamilton and Jefferson and Thomas Jefferson utilized the same method of understanding. Originalism does not remove controversy or disagreement, but it does cabin it within a principled constitutional tradition that makes real the rule of law. Without that, we are destined, as Aristotle warned long ago, to fall into the rule of men. Dude, the Heritage Guide to the Constitution, Edwin Meese III. You got to get this. Chairman of Editorial Advisory Board. Y'all got to get that. Here, Aristotle. Aristotle on the rule of law versus the rule of men. He warned of the dangers that arise when a government of laws is corrupt by a government of men. In his Politics, Aristotle praises the rule of law, and he says this: therefore, he who bids the rule of law may be deemed to bid God, and reason alone rule. But he who bids man rule adds an element of the beast, and passion perverts the mind of rulers, even when they are the best of men. The law is reason unaffected by desire. Desire. So what does all this have to do with all the riots and the senseless killing of the children? Faction! Alexander Hamilton in The Federalist, number 9. I'm not going to read this now, but you read it for yourself. He raises a case against faction and he offers suffrage on behalf of favor for the Union. Faction is in full display now, and it's not even allowed or authorized to take a breath according to law, right? However, it is being allowed to take shape in our cities, and it gives us a deep understanding of what the future holds when people who have sworn to uphold the law fail to in order to pursue their own passions and perversions of order. This is unconscionable. This is an atrocity. It's aggravating, and it's an insult to our intelligence. This is a little God set before the one true God, one that honors their love for themselves rather than that of others. Their neighbor, right? Especially the most innocent of them all, which is their children. So, this is the end of part 1. Get ready for part 2.